A sick girl sold paintings on the street just to keep her chemo sessions going, her hands shaking as illness drained her strength. Each brushstroke was a battle, each sale a lifeline. But fate shifted when a single dad crossed her path, and what he chose to do next changed everything. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. The sound of canvases tumbling across hot pavement shattered the afternoon silence, marking the start of something unforgettable. The canvases slipped from her grip before she even realized the table had tipped. In one horrifying instant, weeks of work scattered across the pavement, smudging under the weight of strangers' footsteps. Emily Carter froze, breath caught in her throat, as the sound of paper tearing ripped through the hum of downtown Austin traffic. Her knees buckled when she dropped down to gather them, scraping against the rough sidewalk, but she hardly noticed the sting. All she could see were her paintings, sunflowers, skylines, portraits of birds in flight, ruined under careless shoes and hot afternoon dust. No. Please, not this one, she whispered hoarsely, clutching a watercolor of a lone tree blooming against a gray sky. The edges had ripped, the center smeared, the promise of payment for her Thursday treatment destroyed. Each brushstroke had been agony, but she had pressed on through the nausea and the bone-deep exhaustion, believing art might just buy her one more chance at life. A voice broke through her panic. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see. Let me help." Emily looked up through tear-blurred eyes. A tall man in his late 30s crouched beside her, carefully lifting a painting from the ground. His suit was expensive, his watch gleamed in the sunlight, but his expression was nothing like the indifference of the passers-by. He handled her work as if it were something fragile, something sacred. Behind him, her display stand lay twisted and broken, the victim of his unintentional collision. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream. But instead, all that came out was a shaky, defeated laugh. "It's fine," she murmured. "Accidents happen." The man hesitated, noticing the tremor in her hands, the paleness in her face, the medical bracelet glinting on her wrist. His brows knit together with recognition. "These are yours?" he asked softly, holding up a watercolor of a child reaching toward the clouds. Emily nodded, struggling to steady herself against the broken table. "Yeah, every one of them." She tried for humor, though the desperation in her tone betrayed her. "Rent doesn't wait for clumsy artists, so I paint fast." The stranger studied the piece, his eyes catching on the details, the streaks of color that symbolized hope, the way the child's hand stretched with longing. "It's beautiful," he whispered, more to himself than to her.
"How much?"
40, she replied quickly, then noticed his attire and corrected herself. "I could do 30, he shook his head. "I'll take 5. 200. Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and resistance flashing across her face. Pride and need wrestled within her, but before she could object, he added, "My daughter loves art, she's 9. Lost her mom 3 years ago." Painting became her voice when words failed her. These would mean something to her. The mention of loss softened Emily's defenses. She understood grief, had lived with it since cancer had stolen her parents years ago. Slowly, she gathered the paintings he chose. The reaching child, a couple dancing in the rain, fireflies glowing in a twilight field, a cracked sidewalk split by a resilient flower, and 2 hands stretching across an unseen barrier. Her fingers moved carefully, wrapping each with reverence, though the simple act seemed to sap the last of her energy. As she bent down for tape, a folded medical bill slipped from her bag. The bold red past due stamp screamed louder than any words. The man caught sight of it before she could shove it back inside. His jaw tightened, his eyes shifting briefly from pity to anger, not at her but at the unfairness scrawled in those numbers. "I should go," Emily said quickly, her voice trembling. "The medication makes me drowsy if I don't eat soon." "When did you last eat?" he asked. She blinked, trying to recall. "This morning." "Maybe yesterday." "It's hard to—" "Come with me," he interrupted gently. "There's a food truck around the corner. The best tacos in the city. I can't let you—" "You're not letting me. I insist. Besides, you just made a sale. We should celebrate." Minutes later, they sat together on a shaded bench. Emily picked at a quesadilla, eating slowly as though each bite fought against her body's resistance. The man, whose name she learned was Daniel Rivers, pretended not to notice, letting silence speak louder than sympathy. Finally, Emily broke it. Lymphoma. Stage 3. Diagnosed 8 months ago. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cosmic joke, right? 4 years of art school, finally ready to live, and then this. Daniel looked down at his hands. The doctors gave my wife odds too. Spreadsheets, schedules, treatments. I organized everything, thought I could fix it. But none of it saved her. His voice wavered. The only thing that helped was when my daughter found painting. Blue oceans, stormy skies. She poured her grief onto canvas until she found a little light. Emily stared at him, surprised at his honesty. And did it work? Eventually. Creating beauty out of pain. Maybe that's the only way through it. Emily's lips trembled. Beauty doesn't pay for chemo. No, Daniel admitted. But maybe hope does something even better. That night, long after Emily had packed up what remained of her stand, Daniel tucked his daughter Ivy into bed. Her room overflowed with paintings, messy, vibrant, alive. On the wall hung the 5 Emily had created, already woven into their world. "Daddy?" Ivy stirred. "Why are you crying?" He hadn't realized he was. "Not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking of someone who needs help." "Then we help them," Ivy said simply. "That's what people do." Daniel kissed her forehead, but her words echoed long after she slept. And by morning, he knew he couldn't walk away. The next morning, Daniel found himself drawn back to the same stretch of South Congress Avenue. He told himself it was coincidence that he simply wanted to pick up more art for Ivy's room, but deep down he knew better. Something about the fragile determination in Emily's eyes had stayed with him through the night, and there she was, sitting at her makeshift stand, brush in hand, a small canvas propped against her knees. Even in the punishing Texas sun, she worked with quiet focus. Her hand trembled occasionally, but her strokes remained steady, controlled, purposeful. "You're back," she said, startled but faintly smiling when she looked up. "Don't tell me Ivy needs more paintings already." "Actually," Daniel replied, setting his briefcase on the ground, "I have a proposition." Emily's expression shifted instantly. She had heard that word before, usually from men who mistook her desperation for vulnerability. She stiffened, putting down her brush. "If this is about—" "No," he interrupted quickly, shaking his head. "Not like that. My company's moving into a new building. 27 blank walls, lobbies, conference rooms, break areas. I showed your work to our design team. They want to commission art. From you." Emily blinked at him, disbelief and wariness mixing across her face. "That's kind, really. But I don't need pity projects from wealthy executives. I'm not some charity case you can—" "You're right," Daniel cut in firmly. "It's not pity. It's talent. I showed them your work and they were impressed. They want your art, Emily. They want your vision." Her eyes softened just for a moment. Then the exhaustion returned. "Even if that were true, I can't promise anything. Some days I can't even get out of bed. What if I can't finish?" "Then you finish what you can," Daniel said gently. "Even if it's one piece, even if it's unfinished. Sometimes the most powerful art is incomplete." Emily looked away, blinking rapidly as if to stop tears from forming. She painted a delicate curve of sky onto the canvas before her. "You make it sound so easy." "It isn't," Daniel admitted, pulling a plastic chair beside her stand. "When my wife was sick, I refused help from everyone. Friends wanted to cook meals, organize fundraisers, sit with her during treatments. I told them no every time. Thought accepting help meant I was failing her. But you know what she told me the morning she died?" Emily held her breath. She said she wished I had let people in, that she wanted our daughter to remember being surrounded by community, not isolated by illness. I robbed them of that. I can't undo it for her. But maybe I can do it for someone else. Emily's brush paused mid-stroke. For the first time, she truly looked at him. Not the polished suit, not the expensive watch, but the man carrying his own scars. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "No," Daniel agreed. "But I know what it's like to face something bigger than yourself. And I know what it's like to lose. Maybe that's enough." They sat in silence for a while, the noise of the city buzzing around them. Emily painted. Daniel typed quietly on his laptop. To passers-by, they might have looked like old friends sharing an afternoon. But beneath the surface, something unspoken had begun to form. A connection neither had expected, but neither could deny. Over the days that followed, Daniel became a fixture at Emily's corner. He brought lunch, always pretending it was extra from a meeting. He offered her shade when the sun burned too hot. Sometimes he simply sat with her, Laptop open, present steady. Word spread among nearby vendors who began to watch them with knowing smiles. "You know people are talking," Emily teased one afternoon, nodding toward the cluster of street sellers who whispered and smirked as Daniel handed her a bottle of water. "About what?" "The tech executive falling for the sick artist. Sounds like a Nicholas Sparks novel, doesn't it?" Daniel's fingers froze above his keyboard. He looked at her, really looked, the humor fading from his eyes. "Would that be such a terrible thing?" Emily's breath caught, but she forced a smile. "It would be cruel. You've already lost someone to illness. You don't need to go through that again. Stop." His voice was sharper than intended, and she flinched. Softer, he added, "You don't get to decide what I need, or what Ivy needs. She met you once and asked if you could teach her to paint clouds. Do you know how rare that is? She barely lets anyone close." Emily swallowed hard, memory washing over her. Ivy had been a whirlwind of curiosity, kneeling cross-legged on the sidewalk, firing questions about colors and brushes. She had watched Emily paint as if the act itself were magic. "She's extraordinary," Emily said softly. "She likes you," Daniel admitted. "Says you understand how to make nothing turn into something." "Clouds," she said, "are impossible, but she trusts you to teach her." Emily's lips curved into a genuine smile, the kind that reached her tired eyes. "She's right. Clouds are tricky. They're just emptiness trying to become something more." Daniel nodded. "Like hope." Emily didn't reply, but her silence said enough. Days slipped into weeks. Slowly, the rhythm of South Congress Avenue shifted. Emily's stand became not just a stall, but a gathering place. Daniel was always nearby, laptop open, food in hand. Ivy visited on weekends, eager to help, her laughter cutting through Emily's hardest days. For the first time in months, Emily felt less like a girl dying on the street and more like an artist whose work was finally being seen. But shadows still lingered. The bills didn't stop. The pain didn't ease. Some mornings Emily could barely lift her brush, and fear gnawed at her. Fear that even hope might not be enough. And yet each time she looked up, Daniel was there, watching, believing, waiting. The idea of an art show began as a whisper, something Daniel mentioned casually one afternoon while Ivy sat beside Emily, sketching her own crooked sunflowers. "My company is planning an opening event for the new building," he said, eyes fixed on his laptop but voice deliberately casual. "We're thinking of inviting local artists, featuring their work in the lobby, clients, investors, press. It could be an opportunity." Emily stiffened, her brush pausing mid-stroke. She had heard offers before, empty promises from people who thought pity counted as kindness. "Daniel," she said slowly, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't need to be someone's charity case." He looked up, meeting her guarded eyes. "This isn't charity. It's a chance for people to see your work, for them to see you." Her defenses cracked, but only slightly. "What if I can't finish? What if I'm too sick? I can't promise you a thing." "Then we display what you can finish," he replied without hesitation. "Even if it's one painting. Even if it's unfinished. Sometimes the most beautiful art is the kind that leaves you wanting more." Emily turned away, swallowing the lump in her throat. He made it sound simple, but nothing about her life was simple. As the weeks passed, preparations quietly began. Daniel arranged meetings with his company's facilities team. Marketing started drafting invitations. But he never pressured Emily. He only showed up with food, with quiet encouragement, with a steadiness that filled the silence. One evening, while Emily packed up her stand, Daniel lingered. "You know," he said, "people are starting to ask questions." She smirked faintly. "About what?" "The suit who spends his afternoons babysitting the sick artist?" "Something like that," he admitted. "And what do you tell them?" "That maybe I stumbled into something worth staying for." Emily froze, her hands tightening around the twine she used to bind her canvases. She wanted to protest, to remind him of the cruel truth, that her time was limited, that building anything with her was reckless. But his gaze was steady, his expression unflinching, and for the first time in months she allowed herself to wonder what it would feel like to be seen, not as a patient or a pity project, but as a woman. When Ivy came to visit that weekend, the bond between her and Emily grew stronger. The little girl sat cross-legged on the sidewalk again, pointing at a half-finished painting. "Why do you make the sky purple instead of blue?" Ivy asked. Emily smiled. "Because sometimes the world doesn't look the way we expect it to, and sometimes it's more beautiful that way." Ivy tilted her head, considering this, then nodded firmly. I like purple skies. From a few feet away, Daniel watched them, something warm stirring in his chest. His daughter's laughter had been rare since Rachel's death, but now here it was again, bright and unburdened, spilling into the streets of South Congress. As the show drew closer, Emily's health faltered. Treatments left her weak, her skin pale, her energy drained. More than once, Daniel found her slumped against the wall behind her stand, struggling to steady her breath. He wanted to carry her home to shield her from the world, but he knew she wouldn't allow it. Don't you dare look at me like that, she muttered one afternoon, catching him staring at her with worry etched across his face. Like what? Like I'm fragile glass. I'm still here, Daniel, still painting. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, he whispered. The night before the show, panic overtook her. She called him at 2 a.m, voice trembling. I can't do it, she said, tears audible through the phone. I'll collapse. I'll embarrass myself. Everyone will see me as nothing but a dying girl pretending to be an artist. Daniel's response was immediate, steady. Then you'll sit. We'll get you a chair, no, a throne. Every queen needs a throne. I'm not a queen, she sobbed. I'm just a sick girl who paints. No, he said firmly. You're an artist who happens to be sick. There's a difference, and tomorrow they'll see that too. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Finally, Emily exhaled, shaky but calmer. Why are you doing this? Because someone should have done it for Rachel, Daniel admitted softly. And because Ivy deserves to see what it looks like when people come together instead of walking away. The morning of the show, Emily stood in front of the mirror, applying makeup with trembling hands. Her dress, borrowed from Daniel's sister, hung loosely on her shrinking frame. The wig Ivy had chosen for her itched against her scalp, but she wore it anyway. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Daniel and Ivy both dressed neatly, carrying a large box. Special delivery, Ivy announced proudly. Daddy said you needed courage, so I made you some. Inside the box was a handmade crown, wire twisted with painted paper flowers, each petal bearing a word in Ivy's careful handwriting. Brave. Strong, artist, friend, hope. Tears flooded Emily's eyes as she sank to her knees, hugging the girl tightly. Over Ivy's shoulder, she met Daniel's gaze. His eyes reflected the same mix of fear, love, and fierce determination she felt. Thank you, Emily whispered, voice breaking. She wasn't sure whether she meant Ivy, Daniel, or both. That evening, the company's sleek new building transformed into a gallery. Spotlights illuminated Emily's paintings, each mounted with a small placard describing her inspiration. Guests in elegant attire murmured as they wandered from piece to piece. The air buzzed with anticipation. Emily, however, could barely stand. Daniel guided her gently to the armchair he'd insisted on, the Queen's throne placed prominently near her featured painting. Ivy fussed over the crown, adjusting it on Emily's head. You okay? Daniel whispered, crouching beside her. Terrified, she admitted. Then look around, he urged softly. She did. A couple stood transfixed before her storm painting, the woman wiping tears from her eyes. A group of executives debated the meaning behind her abstract work. Ivy chattered animatedly to strangers, proudly explaining how the paper airplane piece was about her. For the first time that night, Emily allowed herself to believe. A hush moved through the lobby as guests drifted toward the featured wall. Emily's paper airplane painting glowed beneath a warm pool of light. Daniel squeezed her hand once, then stepped back so the room could meet the work before it met the artist. A woman in a charcoal suit approached, silver hair pinned in a neat coil. Lila Mendoza, Riverbend Gallery, she said, eyes on the canvas. This piece holds people in place. She turned to Emily. I'd like to offer you a spring exhibition. Spring felt like a foreign country. Emily opened her mouth, closed it. I'm not sure what I'll be able to finish. Then we show what exists, Lila replied. Honesty is its own completeness. Across the room, Ivy told two guests that clouds are empty spaces trying to become something. Daniel brought water and knelt beside the throne. Breathe, he whispered. Let them come to you. People stepped forward with praise and questions and quiet confessions. A nurse who painted birds during chemo. A teenager who sketched to calm panic. The lobby felt like a chapel. When the room felt full, Daniel moved to the small stage. 6 weeks ago, he began, I hit a corner and knocked over a life I didn't understand. I found an artist whose courage forced me to pay attention. Insurance pretends to carry more than it does, he said, cadence shifting. Treatment costs have stacked like bricks. The screen behind him brightened with a number that made the room exhale. If you feel moved, buy a piece, commission one, or contribute to the fund our team set up. Let's make it impossible for Emily to choose between medicine and art. Silence, then ignition. A couple near the storm painting lifted bitter paddles. A software lead pledged a corridor commission. An investor pulled out a checkbook. Lila stepped closer. The gallery will acquire 3 pieces tonight, she announced. We'll underwrite framing for future work. Facilities added, and we'll commission a permanent lobby installation paid up front. Emily tried to stand. The room tilted. Daniel steadied her before her knees could bargain with gravity. Stay, he murmured, easing her back. Let them do the running this time. Numbers climbed on the screen, donations, sales, commissions. Every refresh added a rung. Ivy perched on the arm of the throne and slid her small hand into Emily's. Is this what together feels like? She asked. It is, Emily said, laughing through tears. It's loud. By the end of the speeches, the total outpaced the red stamps on the bills. Daniel returned to the microphone only to say, voice thick, "Thank you." The room had already decided that abundance would be the evening's medium. In the weeks that followed, the world rearranged around that decision. There were still hard days, nights that cratered, mornings shaped like nausea, but the scaffolding held. Daniel drove Emily to treatments and waited with coffee that cooled and cooled again. Ivy drew crowns across the calendar and asked nurses questions they answered with indulgent smiles. The first scan whispered good news. The second spoke louder. By the third, the radiologist used a word that felt like a door opening. Remission. Emily pressed her forehead to the cool hallway wall and laughed the kind of laugh that makes strangers laugh too. Painting returned slowly, like strength. She began with small works. A lemon in a blue bowl, a child's hand releasing a kite string, a window at dusk, then reached for larger canvases. The lobby installation grew across her studio wall, paper airplanes overlapping like migrating birds, shadows forming a map you could follow with your eyes and arrive somewhere kinder. In spring, an actual spring that smelled like rain on sidewalks, Lila's gallery opened its doors for Emily's exhibition. People came who had stood in that lobby. People came who had only heard the story. People came because part of them wanted permission to believe again. A reporter asked, "Did cancer give you perspective?" "Pain doesn't hand you perspective like a brochure," Emily said. "People do. The ones who show up with chairs when you can't stand. The ones who make paper crowns and say you're still a queen." Later, as the crowd thinned and the evening softened, Daniel found her studying a canvas of 3 figures sending paper airplanes into a field of wildflowers. "Is that us?" he asked. "I think so," she said, threading her fingers through his. "Hidden wings and all," he exhaled. "If I hadn't knocked over that table, you would have found another corner," she said, smiling. "And I would have painted another sky. But I'm glad it was this sky. I'm glad it was you." Months later, on the small lawn behind the gallery, vows traveled a short distance between 2 people who had already kept them. Ivy stood between them with a crown updated for the occasion, petals spelling family. The guests cheered. The city answered with a breeze that flicked the veil's edge like a page turning. That night, back home, 3 easels waited. 3 cups held brushes drying from a last rinse. On the table lay a fresh sheet of watercolor paper. Emily wrote in a steady hand. For Ivy, who taught us that empty spaces can become something. She looked at Daniel, at the life they were building out of color and courage, and lifted her brush, smiling at last. What simple act of compassion has touched your life in a way you'll never forget? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience may be the spark of hope someone else needs today. Thank you for watching, for believing in kindness, and for being part of this storytelling family. Until next time, keep painting your skies and sending out your paper airplanes of hope. You never know whose heart they'll reach or how far they'll fly.